There's a moment in every man's life where he's working as hard as he's ever worked, sacrificing everything he has, absolutely certain he knows exactly what the problem is, and he's wrong. Not about the effort or the sacrifice, about the problem. He's been solving the wrong one the entire time, and everything he deployed to fix it, the hours, the obsession, the certainty, became the next problem before he ever saw coming. Most men don't catch this until it's too late, until they're knee-deep in a slew of issues that are self-imposed. The clearest illustration of that pattern I've ever seen doesn't come from a business book or a leadership seminar. It comes from a 70-year franchise about a giant radioactive monster. Godzilla has been running since 1954, 30-plus films across multiple eras and continuities. Most people watch it for the spectacle. Cities destroyed, kaiju battles, the scale of it. That's what I did as a kid, wearing out my VHS copy of Godzilla vs. Gigan after the 100th watch through. But now, as an adult battling my own monsters, what I couldn't stop thinking about were the humans. Specifically, what they kept doing wrong. The same thing across 70 years, across every era, across every attempt to solve the Godzilla problem. They pour everything into the wrong problem, and the thing they reach for to solve it becomes the next monster. Every single time. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how this happens, and what it looks like when the problem isn't a kaiju, just your life. Just the decisions you've been making with total certainty about what needs to be fixed. This is Disassembled Heroes and Villains, and this is what Godzilla keeps proving about the way most men think. 1954. In the South Pacific, the United States is testing hydrogen bombs. Nobody knows what they'll disturb, but something deep is awoken from its slumber. Deep in the ocean, a prehistoric creature has survived into the modern era. Ancient, massive, irradiated by the test, driven from his underwater sanctuary. He surfaces, he comes ashore, he destroys Tokyo. Godzilla is not a monster that appeared out of nowhere. He is the consequence of men solving the wrong problem. Because the men running those tests were certain they knew the problem, win the war, project power to their enemies, build the most devastating weapon the world has ever seen before anyone else could. But nobody asked the real question. Not how do we win, but what kind of world do we have to live in once we have. That's the pattern we'll see repeat across the various iterations of the character, but it is with Dr. Serizawa that it gets complicated. A scientist studying elemental oxygen accidentally stumbles onto something volatile and devastating. A chemical reaction that horrifies him immediately. He names it the Oxygen Destroyer, and then he hides it. He keeps researching, hoping to find some beneficial application that justifies what he's discovered. He finds none. So he sits with the knowledge of what he's made, and he doesn't deploy it, because he understands something his contemporaries don't. The solution is more dangerous than the problem. But yet again, Godzilla strikes. The pressure mounts, countless lives are lost, his fiancée finds out, and eventually, reluctantly, Serizawa agrees to use it once. But before he goes into the water, he burns everything. Every note, every document, every piece of research leading to the Oxygen Destroyer, gone. Then he goes underwater, he activates the device, and he cuts his own rope. The only prototype detonated, the notes destroyed, the man who understood it, gone. Here's what makes Serizawa different from every other man in the story. He understood that the problem in front of him, kill Godzilla, wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the weapon he'd be leaving behind. So he solved that one too. He didn't just kill the monster, he killed the chance that his solution would become the next one. It's a move most men never make, because the men that were researching the hydrogen bombs were certain they were solving the right problem. Right up until the moment an irradiated dinosaur leveled a city. The H-bomb tests weren't trying to create Godzilla, they were trying to win, and they never once asked what winning would cost. The bomb created the monster. The monster forced the Oxygen Destroyer into the world. The Oxygen Destroyer created its own set of unintended consequences. He may not be responsible for awakening a sleeping kaiju, but as we solve problems in our lives, with family, friends, work, and everything in between, there's a question we have to ask ourselves. What will this produce? Not just right now, 5 years from now, in your marriage, in your kids, in the man you're becoming while you're solving the problem in front of you. Serizawa burned his notes. Most men don't even think to ask if they should. Serizawa destroyed his notes, but he couldn't destroy the problem, because the weapon of mass destruction that he was responsible for was already in the world, already detonated on the floor of Tokyo Bay. And just like the hydrogen bomb testing that had awoken Godzilla, the destroyer was already doing something nobody asked it to do. Beneath the bay, a colony of prehistoric crustaceans had been lying dormant for 2.5 billion years. ancient organisms from the Precambrian era, surviving in the sediment undisturbed. The oxygen destroyer reached them. It didn't kill them, it changed them. The anaerobic conditions triggered by the detonation caused the colony to begin mutating, evolving in ways nature had never intended. For 4 decades they lay there, changing, growing, becoming something the world had never seen. 41 years after Serizawa sacrificed himself to close the loop, an underwater mining operation in Tokyo Bay disturbed the sediment, and they surfaced. The scientists who encountered them recognized what they were looking at. Creatures that had been changed by the oxygen destroyer, a living version of the weapon Serizawa gave his life to bury. They named the monster Destroyah. The solution that killed the first Godzilla produced the creature that would kill another of the species. Serizawa burned his notes. He died with his formula. He did everything right, and the oxygen destroyer still created the next monster. That's the part that should stop you. Serizawa did everything right. Decades later, his decisions still produced something he never could have predicted. Because it means the question isn't just what do I do with the solution after I use it. It's whether the solution itself, no matter how carefully deployed, leaves something behind that you can't predict and can't control. But before Destroyah, there's Biollante. Dr. Genichiro Shiragami is a geneticist. His daughter Erica is killed in a terrorist bombing at his lab. In this grief, he does what any father with his tools and ambiguous morals would do. He finds a way to bring her back, kinda. He splices her cells into a rose. He wants to preserve something of her. He wants her to keep living in some form. 5 years passed. Mount Mahara erupts, and the earthquake it triggers destroys his roses. In a moment of panic, of desperation, he splices Godzilla's cells into the surviving rose to make it invincible, to make it impossible to lose again. The result is Biollante, a creature born from grief and the result of a father refusing to accept loss, even when the result is catastrophic. Erica's consciousness is still inside it. The psychic who encounters Biollante can hear her, Shiragami's daughter, crying out from inside the monster her father made, trying to save her. Shiragami wasn't trying to create a monster. He was trying to hold on to his daughter. He was solving the wrong problem. Truly, his issue was grief. The solution was genetic splicing, and the thing that splicing produced, a monster that fought Godzilla across the Japanese coastline with his daughter's consciousness trapped inside it, was the consequence of a man who never asked what his love would actually create given the circumstances. But it gets worse. Biollante's cells eventually escape into the atmosphere. The films theorize they drift into space, and that those cells eventually give rise to SpaceGodzilla, a crystalline cosmic monster born from the genetic material of a rose that a grieving father created to hold on to his dead daughter. One man's grief, one moment of desperation, one decision made without asking what it would produce. From the post-war testing of the hydrogen bomb, we see the rise of an ancient monster, the creation of a superweapon, a scientist whose daughter dies and who uses the ancient monster's DNA to create a memorial, another threat rising in Biollante to nearly extinguish humanity. And then, by one of the theories the film puts forward, that threat leading to a larger one in SpaceGodzilla. 3 monsters, one father who couldn't let go. Every solution creates the next problem. Every actor in the chain believed they were doing the right thing. Every consequence was separated from its cause by years, sometimes decades, so that by the time the next monster surfaced, the man who created it had long since moved on. You're not Shiragami. You're not some scientist creating the next monster. But you've made decisions in desperation. You've added something to a situation to make it invincible. More hours, more pressure, more certainty, more force. And until you've watched something unexpected surface from it later, whether it's in your marriage, with your kids, and those around you, one unconsidered action, one overcorrection, one moment of refusing to ask what it would produce. And suddenly, you're years down the road, wondering how you got here. The pattern we've seen so far isn't exclusive to the Heisei films. It shows up every time humans face Godzilla, and the most modern entries in the franchise prove it hasn't changed. Start with Shin Godzilla. 2016, a creature emerges in Tokyo Bay, and the Japanese government's response is the entire movie. Not the monster, the meetings. Committee after committee, approval chains, officials who can't act until someone above them signs off. And every minute they spend protecting their position instead of solving the problem, the creature grows into something worse. The government wasn't solving the Godzilla problem. They were solving the how do we not look bad problem, the how do we not take the blame problem. They were certain the priority was process, hierarchy, saving face, and by the time they understood the actual problem, the cost was already catastrophic. It's what happens when the thing you're protecting is your standing instead of the people you're supposed to serve. Most men have sat in that meeting, some of us have run it, but the modern version that matters most is the one that's most personal. And for that, it's Godzilla -1. Koichi Shikishima is a kamikaze pilot at the end of World War II. He's given a mission that's supposed to end with his death, and he doesn't do it. He fakes a malfunction, lands on Odo Island instead. He couldn't go through with dying, and by no means is it weak to be afraid to confront one's own morality. Any honest man understands that. But that night, Godzilla attacks the island. The mechanics hand Shikishima a chance to fight back, get in the plane, fire the gun, distract the creature, and he freezes. He can't pull the trigger. Everyone on that island dies except him and one mechanic, a man named Tachibana who will spend years blaming him for it. Shikishima survives it, and he carries it, not as grief that fades over time, but as guilt that builds, that eats away at your soul. He goes back to a ruined Tokyo, builds a makeshift family with a woman named Noriko, and never once believes he deserves any of it. He's a man convinced he was supposed to be dead, that everyone around him is alive on borrowed time he stole by being a coward. So when Godzilla returns and threatens everything, Shikishima decides he finally knows the answer. He'll finish that mission. He'll do what he should have done the first time. He gets in a plane, loads it with explosives, and prepares to fly it into Godzilla's mouth. A kamikaze run, years late, to settle the debt he's been carrying. He's certain that's the problem, the unfinished death, the cowardice he never corrected. But yet again, he's solving the wrong problem. Because the problem was never that he failed to sacrifice himself. The problem was that he kept treating his own life as a thing he owed. The fear-driven certainty that the only way to fix what he had done was to throw himself at it harder, to sacrifice more, to prove something with his death because he couldn't figure out what to do with his life. But the mechanic, Tachibana, the one who blamed him, the one who had every reason to let Shikishima die fulfilling his guilt, repairs that plane for the final mission. And he builds an ejector seat into it. He tells Shima how to live. He builds him a way out. Because somewhere in all of it, Tachibana understood the thing Shikishima couldn't. The honorable death wasn't the answer. Shikishima flies into Godzilla's mouth, detonates the plane, and ejects at the last second. He lives. The man who spent the entire film certain that the answer was his death finally solved the right problem, which was learning how to stay alive for the people who needed him. That's the whole thing. Most men have a kamikaze run they're convinced they need to make. The grand gesture, the thing they'll throw themselves at to prove they're not what they're afraid they are. The certain that the answer is more sacrifice, more force, more throwing yourself at a wall until something gives. And almost none of them stop to ask whether they're solving the wrong problem. There's a line from another Serizawa, the one in the MonsterVerse films, named after the original. He says it right before the franchise's whole question comes into focus. Nature has a way of balancing itself. The only question is, what part will we play? That's the question this whole thing has been building towards. Not how do you avoid the consequences, because you won't. Every man creates them. The question is what part you play when the next one arrives. Whether you reach for the grand gesture or the quiet correction, whether you throw yourself at the wrong problem one more time, or you finally stop and ask what the right one actually is. I want to talk about my own monsters for a minute, because I spent most of my life solving the wrong problem, and the thing I kept deploying to solve it was the same thing every time: my ego. Here's what that looked like. I'd already done this once in college. I was pre-med, eyes set on a white lab coat, the whole thing mapped out, and I sucked at it, genuinely struggling in the classes that were supposed to be the foundation of the entire career. The evidence was right in front of me, and I refused to look at it, because admitting it wasn't a fit felt like failing at the version of my life I've been invested in since high school. I wasted over a year being certain about a problem I diagnosed wrong from the start. That should have taught me something, but it didn't, because a few years later I opened a comic shop, and I ran that shop for 3 years telling myself one more week. One more week and it turns around. One more week and the numbers work. I said one more week for over a year. And on the outside I was unshakable, total confidence, the guy who had it handled. But on the inside, I was sick to my stomach every day. And the way I dealt with that sickness was to push harder, work more, pour more hours into the thing that was making me sick. Because slowing down felt like admitting I was wrong. My health went, my relationships thinned out, the hobbies disappeared, all of it fed into the shop, into the certainty, into the refusal to look like I'd failed at the thing I was told everyone I was going to do. My mom told me more than once that I looked terrible, that I couldn't keep doing this to myself. I didn't listen. My wife saw it, my friends saw it, my family saw it. Everyone around me could see the man faltering under the weight of the problem he refused to face. I was so certain I was right that it wouldn't have mattered what any of them said. That's the oxygen destroyer. That's the kamikaze run. The ego that's so sure the answer is to throw yourself at the wall harder that you can't hear anyone telling you the wall is the problem. It ended the way those things end. One night, I broke. The pressure I've been holding for over a year finally caught up with me, and I sat down with my wife and I completely broke down. And in the wreckage of that, I finally made the steps to wash my hands at the shop. But here's what I've learned since. The gut feeling that kept me going, through pre-med, through the shop, it felt like conviction, it felt like discipline, but it was fear. The whole engine was fear. Keep going or you failed. Keep going or you have to admit you were wrong. Keep going or all of this was for nothing. It was fear masquerading as certainty. And I know that now because I felt the other thing, the real thing. When I was getting ready to propose to my wife, a week out, a few days before Christmas, I wasn't a very spiritual man at the time, but I asked God if I was making the right choice, the most important decision of my life, and I asked. And I felt this warmth radiating through my chest, something I had never felt before in my life. I never felt that in the comic shop. I never felt it grinding through pre-med. Through every ego-driven decision I forced, I never once felt that warmth, because those weren't the right paths. They were just the paths I was too proud to walk away from. They were my whale, swallowing me up while I refused to follow the right path, like Jonah refusing to go to Nineveh. I felt it now when I'm on the right one. It's a real, physical thing. The hair stand up on the back of my neck. A warmth stretches across my shoulders and down my spine, almost like a spidey sense telling me I'm doing the right thing. That's the difference I couldn't feel before. When I started building this channel, I prayed for guidance every day. And here's what told me I was finally on the right path. It wasn't that good things happened, though they did. A sponsorship came, a video took off in a way nothing had before, but that's not how I knew. I knew because for the first time, the work didn't make me sick. The warmth was there. The path didn't fight me the way the shop fought me every single day. With the shop, I never asked. I just put my head down and pushed, certain I was right until it broke me. But with the channel, I asked first, and I could finally feel the difference between the path driven by fear and the one I was actually supposed to be on. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Romans, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." The pattern of this world is the ego. It's the certainty that solution is more forced, more hours, more sacrifice, more proving. It's deploying the same oxygen destroyer over and over and never once asking what it's producing. The renewing of your mind is the discernment. It's the pause Serizawa took. It's the ejector seat Tachibana built. It's learning to feel the difference between the gut that's driven by fear and the one that's pointing you home. I'm not finished with this. I still slip. There are still days the ego takes the wheel and I'm halfway down the wrong road before I feel the warmth is gone. But now I ask, every day, as a father, as a husband, as a man trying to build something that matters, I ask for the guidance before I deploy the solution. What will this produce? And that's the only question that has ever changed anything for me. 70 years of Godzilla films, dozens of monsters, and underneath all of it, the same pattern over and over. A problem appears, someone reaches for the most powerful solution they have, they deploy it without asking what it will produce, and the thing they used to solve the problem becomes the next problem. Bigger, more devastating, just the can kicked down the road. A hydrogen bomb wakes the monster. The oxygen destroyer that kills the monster becomes Destroyah. The grief that builds the rose becomes Biollante, and then SpaceGodzilla. The bureaucracy protecting itself lets the city burn, and a broken man, certain the answer is his own death, almost throws away the one life that people around him still needed. Every one of them was solving the wrong problem. Not because they were stupid, not because they were weak, but because they were certain. And certainty is the thing that stops you from asking the only question that matters. What will this produce? Here's what I want you to take from this. You are going to face the monster. That part isn't optional. Something in your life is going to demand a response. It's a problem at work, a strain on your marriage, a fear about your kids, a version of yourself you're afraid you're becoming. The monster always comes. And when it does, you have a solution ready. The thing you always reach for. More hours, more force, more control. The grand gesture, the kamikaze run, whatever your oxygen destroyer is. The work, the actual work, is the pause before you deploy it. It's Serizawa burning his notes because he understood what the solution would become if left unchecked. It's Tachibana building the ejector seat because he understood the honorable death was the wrong answer. It's the discernment to feel the difference between the gut that's driven by fear and the one that's pointing home. Nature always has a way of balancing itself. The only question is what part you'll play. Will you be the man who deploys the solution and walks away, leaving the next monster for someone else to find? Or the man who stops and asks and has the humility to wonder whether the thing he's so certain about is the wrong problem entirely? You won't get it right every time. I don't. I still slip. I'm still halfway down the wrong road some days before I notice the warmth is gone. But you can ask the question, before the next decision, before the next solution, before you reach for the thing you've always reached for. What will this produce? Not just right now, 5 years from now, in your marriage and your kids, and the man you're becoming while you solve the problem in front of you. And you need to ask it every single time. And with that, stay disciplined, stay present, stay faithful, and as always, stay handsome.